God has smiled on me. He has set me free. God has smiled on me. He's been good to me. Testify for us, Ashley.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Yes.
That saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found.
Yes.
Was blind, but now I see.
God has smiled on me. He has set me free. God has smiled on me. He's been good. He's been. Stay right there. He's been good. He's been good. He's been good. He's been. Let's take it home. He's been good. He's been good to me.
Born a slave in Virginia on January 1st, 1800, at a young age, Clara Brown and her mother were sold to Ambrose Smith, a Virginian tobacco farmer. At the age of 18, Clara Brown married a slave named Richard, and over the years they had 4 children, Richard, Margaret, and twins, Paulina Ann and Eliza Jane. At 8, Paulina Ann drowned. Clara and her family were together for 17 years, but when Ambrose Smith died, her entire family was split up and sold off one by one to different owners. Clara was purchased by George Brown, a plantation owner in Logan County, Kentucky, for whom she worked as a house slave for 21 years. When George Brown died in 1856, as stipulated in his will, Clara was granted her freedom. She immediately moved to St. Louis, where she believed Missouri law protected free blacks. Her first task was search for the family she had lost. She soon found out that her husband and son had both died. But she also heard rumors that her daughter, Eliza Jane, had moved west years earlier. Clara headed west, moving from state to state while working as a cook and laundress. Brown worked as a maid and a cook for a family leaving for Kansas, but she was anxious to move farther west. She had saved enough money to pay for the trip, but blacks were prohibited from riding the stagecoaches. In April 1859, she met Colonel Benjamin Wadsworth, who offered her a job as a cook for 26 men in exchange for free transportation on a wagon train headed for Colorado. Little did she know, she would walk most of the dusty, hot, and miserable 8-week, 700-mile journey, arriving in Denver in June 1859. She was Denver's first Black woman resident, and she is believed to be the first African-American woman involved in the Colorado Gold Rush. She was 59 years old. Not finding any news of her daughter in Denver, Brown followed the tide of miners into the mountains and the town of Central City, which was made up of gold mines, stores, saloons, and shacks where miners lived with their families. There, of course, she opened a laundry business for gold miners and worked as a midwife, cook, and nursemaid. Brown collected whatever gold dust came out of the miners' pockets and made extra money by cooking and cleaning for the miners, working long hours and denying herself any luxuries. With her saved earnings, she funded the construction of St. James Methodist Church, and she was one of the founding members of the first Sunday school in existence, using her home as the classroom. She gave generously to those in her community. Her home in Central City served as a hospital, church, and hotel for the less fortunate. And she was such a good nurse that everyone came to her with various ailments. Pregnant women often came to Clara to help deliver their babies. Known lovingly as Aunt Clara, Brown took on a partner and expanded her laundry business. She invested her earnings in real estates and mines, and after a few years had accumulated $10,000 in savings, a staggering amount for one person to accumulate at that time. A keen businesswoman, she owned building lots in Denver, houses in Central City, and mines in Boulder, Georgetown, and Idaho Springs. She continued helping the needy for the rest of her life and spent large sums of money helping Blacks move west. Far and wide, she was known as the Angel of the Rockies. The miners she supported while they looked for gold paid her handsomely for her kindness and generosity when they struck pay dirt. In 1879, an exodus from slavery after Reconstruction began in earnest. More than 900 African American families from Mississippi stopped in St. Louis on their way to the West. Acting on behalf of then Colorado Governor Frederick Pitkin, Clara Brown assisted families move to Colorado and get jobs in various mining camps. She financed many of these families with her own money. By this time, she was 79 years old. By age 80, Brown's funds were depleted due to money spent on charitable contributions and efforts to find her family. When she could no longer sustain the higher altitude, Brown moved to Denver and lived in the home of a friend. After years of writing letters to officials in various locations, in 1982, Brown received news that a Black woman named Eliza Jane was living in Council Bluffs, Iowa, who was about the right age to be Clara's daughter. Clara immediately traveled there to see if this woman was Eliza Jane, and miraculously, it was her. The story of this heartwarming reunion was published by newspapers throughout the West. The Council Bluff newspaper reported on March 4th, 1882, that Brown was still strong, vigorous, tall, her hair thickly streaked with gray, and her face kind. The two women returned to Denver and lived there together until Clara's death. In 1885, Clara Brown was elected the first African American and first female member of the Society of Colorado Pioneers for her role in the early history of Colorado and the Colorado Gold Rush. She was interviewed by the Denver Tribune Republican on June 26, 1885. The society was established to recognize pioneers who came to Colorado before 1861. In that same year, Clara Brown died in her sleep on October 26. The Society of Colorado Pioneers buried her with honors. Crowds flocked to her funeral at Central Presbyterian Church in Denver. At graveside services, Colorado Governor James B. Grant, Denver Mayor John L. Grout praised Aunt Clara. A plaque commemorating the life of Miss Brown hangs at St. James Methodist Church in Central City. stating that her home had served as the first church in Central City. In 1930, a chair in the Central City Opera House was installed in her honor. Clara's life and achievements were commemorated with a stained glass portrait of her in the old Supreme Court chambers of the state capitol in 1977. Clara Brown is considered one of the 100 most influential women in the history of Colorado. She was inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame in 1989. In 2003, an opera was written about her life called Gabriel's Daughter. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Rest on.